Lieutenant James Hart had been aboard the ISS Endeavour for 8 months, long enough to learn most of the major cultural taboos that could get you in trouble with alien crew members, but not long enough to have memorized every nuance for the dozen species represented aboard the joint research vessel. The ship maintained an entire manual of things not to say to avoid accidentally offending or confusing their alien colleagues. It was updated weekly. James had been working closely with Dr. Lissa Keithrain for the past few months, a Valthari scientist whose species was known for brilliant research, reserved social interactions, and very specific cultural protocols about relationships that James had mostly avoided triggering by keeping things professional. They developed a comfortable working relationship built on mutual respect, and the kind of easy banter that develops when people spend long hours together analyzing data in laboratory spaces. The Endeavour was currently investigating unusual stellar phenomena, which meant long shifts of tedious sensor calibration and data processing. During one particularly exhausting overnight shift, 16 hours in, Lissa was explaining a complex mathematical model while simultaneously reorganizing equipment with remarkable efficiency. James, watching her multitask with impressive competence, said with clearly joking tone, "You know, you make a very sexy wife. The whole brilliant, organized, and capable of doing 6 things at once package." It was lighthearted, the kind of complimentary comment he'd made to colleagues before, intended to acknowledge competence through humor. He expected Lissa to laugh it off or roll her eyes. Instead, Lissa stopped what she was doing, looked at him with complete seriousness and responded, "I agree. I would make an excellent partner and I accept your proposal." James's brain took several seconds to catch up. Good one. You almost had me thinking. I'm not joking, Lieutenant Hart. You've made a formal proposal according to Valthari custom and I've accepted. We are now formally betrothed. She said it with the same calm certainty she used when explaining scientific principles, like she was stating obvious facts rather than claiming they were engaged based on his stupid joke. I what? No, that was a joke. I wasn't proposing anything. I was just making a light-hearted comment because we've been working for 16 hours. James felt panic rising as he realized this was somehow not mutual understanding of humor. In Valthari culture, comments about someone's suitability as a spouse are only made when the speaker has genuine intent, Lissa explained patiently. Our social framework considers such statements too significant to be spoken casually. You don't mention marriage unless you mean it. The fact that you characterized my qualities as making me desirable as a wife indicates you've been evaluating me as a potential partner, and speaking that evaluation aloud constitutes formal proposal. But I didn't know that. I was making a joke based on human cultural norms where people say things like that without meaning formal commitment. Intent is demonstrated through speech in Valthari culture. If you didn't intend proposal, you wouldn't have spoken the words. She tilted her head slightly. Though I should clarify, are you saying you didn't mean what you said, that you don't actually find me competent and desirable as a partner? James realized he was trapped. You are those things. You're brilliant and organized and yes, objectively attractive, but saying that doesn't mean I want to marry you. Why would you evaluate my qualities as a spouse and speak that evaluation unless you were considering partnership? That seems inefficient and socially confusing. Lissa genuinely didn't seem to understand why someone would comment on marriage suitability without meaning it. Humans do that. We make jokes. We say things to be funny or complimentary without meaning them as literal proposals. That sounds emotionally exhausting. How do you ever know when someone is being sincere? James didn't have a good answer to that. James immediately reported the situation to the Endeavour's cultural liaison officer, hoping for quick resolution, where someone explained to Lissa that human jokes don't constitute binding proposals. Instead, the liaison officer, a human with extensive cross-cultural diplomacy experience, looked pained. Lieutenant, you've accidentally invoked Valthari betrothal customs. Those are taken extremely seriously by their culture and have legal standing under Valthari law. Dr. Keithran's acceptance creates formal engagement that can't be easily dissolved without significant social and legal consequences. But I didn't mean it as a proposal. Doesn't intent matter? In human culture, yes. In Valthari culture, speech is considered evidence of intent. They have strict social frameworks about not saying things you don't mean. If you said she'd make a good wife, they interpret that as you having evaluated her for that role and communicated your conclusion. The liaison side. You can attempt to withdraw the proposal, but doing so after she's accepted will be interpreted as you either lying about your initial assessment or changing your mind after she demonstrated trust in your sincerity. Either interpretation will significantly damage her social standing in Valthari communities and probably end your working relationship. So my options are marry my work partner based on a joke, or ruin her reputation by admitting I wasn't serious. Essentially, yes. Though there is a third option. You could proceed with the betrothal period, which lasts approximately 6 months in Valthari culture, and use that time to either genuinely explore whether partnership might work or find a mutually acceptable way to dissolve the engagement that doesn't assign blame to either party. The liaison offered this with visible sympathy. I realize this is terrible situation born from cultural misunderstanding, but Valthari customs are well documented in our database. You should have known better than to make jokes about marriage with a Valthari colleague. James met with Lissa again to discuss their options. She was remarkably understanding about the misunderstanding while also being firm that from her cultural perspective, he had made a proposal and she had accepted it. I understand you didn't intend formal proposal according to human customs, but you did speak the words, and I heard them according to Valthari interpretation. We can proceed with betrothal and see if partnership is viable, or we can attempt to dissolve the engagement in ways that minimize social consequences. But we can't simply pretend it didn't happen. She was being gracious about the whole situation, which made James feel even worse about the unintended mess he'd created. I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know my comment would be interpreted as proposal. I never meant to put you in this position. I know, but now we're here and we need to decide how to proceed. Lissa's voice was gentle. For what it's worth, I wouldn't have accepted if I found the prospect completely unacceptable. I've enjoyed our working relationship, and I find you intelligent and kind. I'm willing to explore whether we might be compatible as partners. James realized she was offering him a graceful path forward, treating his accident as opportunity rather than disaster. Okay, let's try the betrothal period. 6 months to figure out if this could actually work or find a respectful way to end it. Agreed. The Valthari betrothal period involved specific customs about spending time together, learning each other's preferences and values, and determining compatibility before formal marriage. James approached it with resignation and guilt, expecting 6 months of awkward obligation. Instead, he discovered that Lissa, freed from the professional distance they'd maintained as colleagues, was someone he genuinely enjoyed spending time with beyond their work relationship. She was funny in dry, subtle ways he'd never noticed when they were focused on research. She was genuinely interested in his perspectives and experiences. She approached the betrothal systematically, but without making it feel clinical. And James realized that the qualities he'd jokingly identified, her brilliance, her organizational skills, her capability, were actually things he valued deeply in ways he hadn't consciously processed before making his stupid comment. I've been thinking, he told her one evening after they'd spent the day exploring the station together, about what you said, how humans reveal truths through jokes that we're not ready to acknowledge seriously. And maybe you were right. I wouldn't have made that comment if some part of me hadn't been thinking about you in that context. I just expressed it through humor, because That felt safer than admitting genuine interest. Lissa smiled. I suspected as much. Humans are remarkably transparent when you learn to read the subtext of their jokes. You've been attracted to me for months, haven't you? James asked, the realization dawning. That's why you accepted so quickly. Yes. I'd been noticing you but hadn't considered pursuing relationship because I assumed humans didn't take such things seriously enough to be compatible with Valthari commitment frameworks. She met his eyes. Your proposal, despite being rooted in misunderstanding, revealed that you had been evaluating me as a partner, even if you didn't consciously realize it. James laughed. So we were both interested but too caught up in our own cultural assumptions to do anything about it until I accidentally proposed. Essentially, though I prefer to think of it as your subconscious being smarter than your conscious mind, recognizing someone compatible and attempting to secure partnership before you could overthink it. Over the following months, they developed genuine relationship built on discovery that they were remarkably compatible. Lissa's systematic approach to partnership meant they actually discussed expectations, preferences, and potential issues rather than letting them fester. James's more intuitive style balanced her analytical frameworks. They were, against all odds and despite the absurd circumstances, actually good together. When the 6-month betrothal period ended, James and Lissa faced the decision: formalize the marriage or dissolve the engagement. James chose to proceed, not out of obligation, but because he'd genuinely fallen for the woman he'd accidentally proposed to. The wedding incorporated both Valthari and human traditions. James's speech acknowledged their unusual origin. I proposed to Lissa by accident, through a joke I didn't realize was a proposal. But spending 6 months actually getting to know her taught me that my subconscious was smarter than my conscious mind. It recognized someone amazing and tried to lock that down before I could overthink it. He smiled at her. So while I didn't mean to propose, I'm very glad I did. Lissa's response was characteristically direct. He said I'd make a sexy wife. He was correct. I'm very good at this. The assembled guests, human and alien alike, laughed, and James realized that what had started as his worst cultural misunderstanding had become the best accident of his life. Years later, their story became cautionary tale aboard the Endeavor about being careful with jokes around species who don't share human casual relationship to language. But it also became example of how cultural misunderstandings can create unexpected opportunities if both people approach them with honesty and willingness to see where they lead. James learned to be more careful about cultural context before making jokes, but he also learned that sometimes accidents reveal truth you weren't ready to admit consciously. And Lissa learned that human humor, while confusing, sometimes expresses genuine feelings that humans aren't quite ready to acknowledge directly, and that responding to those feelings seriously, even when they're expressed as jokes, can create something real. Their relationship proved that sometimes the universe has better plans than your careful intentions, and that the best partnerships can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, even when they start with a joke you didn't mean to make and a proposal you didn't know you were offering. You'd make a very sexy wife, he'd said jokingly. I agree, she'd responded seriously. And from that moment of crossed cultural wires came a partnership neither had planned but both came to treasure, proving that sometimes the most important commitments begin with words you didn't mean to speak but needed to say anyway.